Today, I'd like for us to take just a few minutes to ponder a question people of many different walks of life have asked throughout the ages. Some ask the question as part of their pursuit of metaphysical knowledge, while others ask it in response to tragedies endured by others or by themselves. The answers are manifold, and they come from reason or evidence or faith. And the question is this: where is God? In a National Academy of Sciences article, the subject of believers' estimates of their God's beliefs was investigated, and the link to that article is in the note card. They discovered that a believer tends to consider what their God believes in the same way they consider what they believe themselves, but they consider another person's beliefs in a slightly less egocentric way. Perhaps this is why 100 different people can read the same Bible passages, for example, and depending on what they already believe is true, those 100 people can come up with 1,000 different conclusions concerning what the passages clearly mean. And they might all be convinced that God revealed the meaning to them. Just a few decades ago, religious slave owners pointed to Bible passages to justify their ownership of other human beings, while today, most Christians and Christian apologists argue strongly against slavery, finding it absurd to accept the pro-slavery claims of the Bible at face value. Another study performed brain scans while people were being asked various questions. Describing the contrast between themselves and their God showed a certain type of brain activity, while describing the contrast between themselves and others or God and others showed different brain activity. This could suggest that the brain of the believer treats the believer's God as though that God is not a separate entity. In other words, the mind seems to treat the person's God as though it is just another part of that individual's personality. And while that doesn't prove anything about the existence of a God, it gives us an interesting glimpse into the human mind and suggests that, regardless of what we think we believe, our mind seems to not regard God as existing outside of itself. Countless wars and unspeakable atrocities have been justified by religious beliefs and ancient holy texts, leaving millions of human corpses in their wake. Now, you and I probably both are appalled by the mass genocides, the enslavement of children, the owning of other people as personal property, and the other ways in which depraved humans have violated those they saw as somehow beneath them. And because of that, those of us who believe in a God probably firmly believe he, she, or it condemns those actions and attitudes as evil. But do we see those things as wrong because we believe our particular God says they're wrong? Or do we believe our chosen deity is opposed to them because we are? Whatever our position, whether love and acceptance or hatred and condemnation or a combination of both, we can find support for it in our particular holy book. And those who believe those scriptures are the very words of their God raise up apologists to explain away the parts that are in conflict with their own sense of right and of wrong. There are others who accept parts of their scriptures while rejecting other parts, believing only the loving, merciful, and benevolent parts are inspired. For example, there are churches who, to their credit, support the LGBT community and accept their romantic relationships as valid and good. And to do so, they must disregard parts of the Bible that say that they should either be put to death or burn in hell. Some say those ignorant and hateful passages have been corrupted or weren't inspired by God and therefore shouldn't have been included in the Bible at all. But some of the same churches believe we all came from Adam and Eve, possibly less than 10,000 years ago. There was a worldwide flood through which God wiped out humanity except for Noah and his family. Jonah was swallowed by a big fish magically full of breathable air and antacids. Millions of people walked across a sea parted by God, and other stories that all of the natural sciences have clearly shown to be myths. And that suggests it was not a thorough, critical examination of the Bible texts that caused them to believe gender diversity is okay. Rather, it suggests that already believing those in the LGBT community are good just as they are, they considered that belief to be coming from God and thus examined the Bible in that light. So, with the vast multitude of divergent doctrines and beliefs, one might ask, where is God? Is he in one of the groups of beliefs out there today? Or, as Joseph Smith claimed, God told him, is God in none of the existing groups? Or perhaps, as the evidence strongly suggests, the voice people tend to attribute to their God or gods is perhaps really their own. Okay, now that I've lost all of us who believe in a God, let's move on to a different way in which today's question is asked. When infants are starving to death or dying of horrible diseases, where is God? When children are being beaten, raped, and killed, where is God? When natural disasters wipe out hundreds or thousands of people and leave those who survive without homes or loved ones, where is God? The common answer is that God is right there, and things could have been worse. Now, this response is so widely accepted that people have reported fires in which the Bible or cross was undamaged while the rest of the building was completely destroyed, and said that that was a miracle and proved those things are holy. In some cases, people died. Was a Bible or a cross more important than the people? Was God there, but he had to choose between the two? Or were the people evil and deserved to burn to death, presumably before being cast into a lake of fire to continue burning for all eternity? Now, I realize these are hard questions, but since you're obviously still listening, I commend you for enduring the inner discomfort as we ask them together. During the Holocaust, how many of the millions of Jews in the concentration camps could not understand why they were there? Many of them were bound to be devout, God-fearing people. How many of them do you suppose asked the question, where is God? In the Old Testament story of the Tower of Babel, God was upset that the people were united in building a tower that would reach into the heavens. Let's read part of that story. Genesis 11, verses 5 through 9. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they purpose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Well, so much for the claim in 1 Corinthians 14:33 that says, For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. He did confuse their language. Anyway, verse 5 says, But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. Why did the Lord have to come down? Where was he before he came down? Then in verse 7 we read, Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Of course, we know language did not develop like this, and we can trace languages back much further than the time this event is proposed to have taken place. Instead, it was most likely an attempt to explain, without understanding how languages develop, why everyone does not speak the same one. But if someone had asked the writer, "In your story, where is God?" might they have said, "In heaven, seated on the dome"? Now, it's interesting to speculate, but we can't know for certain what their ideas concerning God's location might have been. Now, John 4:24 says that God is a spirit. Something spiritual is something supernatural or not within the realm of physical reality. A spirit is something that is incorporeal or without material existence. Spirit can also be defined as the inner person, that person being a product of the human mind. Now, I agree with the author of John in this verse, and the evidence would also seem to agree. So, where is God? In the myth of Eden, in Genesis chapter 3, God was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. In the myth of the Tower of Babel and Sodom and Gomorrah, God was somewhere in the sky, coming down from time to see what people were doing and to judge them for it. In Psalm chapter 139, God appears to be everywhere. Let's read that one. Psalm 139, verses 7 through 10. "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." So God is wherever your imagination can take you. In the furthest reaches of outer space to the deepest parts of the earth, God is there. In the womb and in the bed of death, God is there. You can't see him, measure him, or verify he exists. The Bible warns against testing him or questioning his existence. As a church erroneously posted on their sign, "Reason is the enemy of faith." When observed by a believer, God is everywhere, in everything, at all times, despite what the evidence may say. When observed by the skeptic, God is nowhere in physical reality, which is what John 4:24 says. So, where is God? His kingdom is within you. Your body, or more accurately, your mind, is his temple. When your mind creates an inner representation of the physical world so that you can perceive it, he is in that inner world. When you look at the world and you imagine no hunger, no abuse, no wars, and no disease, he can be in that vision. When you think of all the good things and give him thanks, he is in those thoughts and is both the giver of thanks and the object of gratitude. When you pray for your healing, he responds in the ways the human mind is able, and sometimes the miracle of the placebo effect brings complete recovery or improvement. He dwells in the place where visions are given, voices are heard, love is overflowing, and insights occur. And he goes by many names. He can be male, female, a sexless, genderless force, or a number of gods working together or sometimes at odds. It all depends on what your imagination creates. And if you believe God is loving through you, you are very likely to show love to others. If that love is reserved for only certain ones, then your God belief only serves to show your own prejudice. If you believe God expects you to help those in need, you are more likely to give a helping hand to those who need it. If that help is for the purpose of converting the needy to your religion or sect, then it is not pure. If your view of God flexes and moves in light of new discoveries, you will be open to exploring with eyes wide open. If your view of God demands that you reject facts when they conflict with what you believe are his holy writings, then your ability to reason will be warped. A belief in a god or gods can be as good or bad as you are, and or as good or bad as those whose own minds shaped the God in which you happen to believe. Where is God? God is within you, within your mind, within your imagination. And if that God brings you joy and peace and goodwill toward others without also creating ignorance, an unreasonable approach to evidence, or the need to force your will and beliefs on others, also known as your God's will and beliefs on others, then congratulations. As a lover of imagination, I can enjoy the idea of a divine author of life and love. And as a lover of truth, I must agree with the claim of some that you are God, for it is very probable that God is you. Well, for those who are still listening, I hope that gave some food for thought. And if you were offended, I hope you can turn the bright light of rationality on that offense and be set free. Let's take a few minutes in reflection as we let these ideas just settle in. And in a few minutes, we're going to meet in the garden out front across from the church, and you're invited to join us there or to just hang out together for a while. But for now, let's allow any inner turmoil to do what it does as we rest in our awareness of the feelings of life within. The breath that moves in and moves out, the tingling or warmth in our hands, arms, face, and throughout our entire body. And as we play some peaceful and inspiring music, let us embrace the love, peace, and even the bliss that all these things can bring.